Okay, so we just had our first team meeting of the week, which always kind of pulls us into both micro spaces and macro spaces of, who we are as a team and as a business and the exact projects that we're working on, but then also what else is kind of going on in our small business ecosystem. So we thought it would be super appropriate to kick off the week, especially as we hit that mid-year mark with a little deep dive into the world of being a small business. So Emma, you want to get us started?
Yeah, so ever since I started with A&M back in September of 2020, one of the biggest questions people ask me when I'm telling them about my role is what it's like to work in a small business and what the operations look like and what my daily, responsibilities and workflow and all of that kind of thing. So we just thought it would be interesting to kind of share our experience and kind of continue the conversation around the culture of a small business and kind of deep dive into our operations here at A&M. So we have all prepared a couple questions to kind of just go around and ask each other, and just hopefully this is like an interesting and little insight to our little team here, small but mighty.
Amazing. So on that note, Emma, since you're at first, so you started with us full time in September of 2020, but you actually interned with us a year prior to that. And we were just kind of exploring working together when COVID hit and all of that. So, you've been involved in part of the team, but in a different capacity before then. So how do you feel like our operations have changed or evolved over the past couple of years since we first met?
Yeah, it's fun to think back. It was definitely a lot different when I started. One of the main things was that we were really just an events company, and we specialized in, experiential marketing, but it was all pretty much centered around events. So my first experience working with A&M was more on that side. And so when I started my full-time role, I was more plugged into the marketing side, and that's kind of one of our newer, ripple effects since COVID and all of that. And so because we were expanding and we're still expanding, it's kind of forced us to look at our internal operations and where we are strong and where our weaknesses are, and kind of, how we can, one of the things we talk about is tracking our hours and making sure that everything is being documented like during our day and the work that we do. I'm so sorry, this fly.
I love it. I was going to say, I think we need to pause and address the fly in the room.
I'm sorry, the whole time
I feel like this is one of like the beauties of being on a small team, is just like we get it, and like we can probably even imagine like the type of morning that you've had being joined by your little friend.
I think I just need to get a swatter out really quick and take care of this.
You handled it beautifully. I don't know how you stayed focused, because I've been really impressed.
I was like, the whole time I was talking, I was like, I don't know where this is going, because all I can think about is this damn fly. I'm so sorry.
We need to like include this and just take like a like BRB like swatter break.
BRB. What they want. I don't know where it is. So
You look so cute too. You're
now it wants to hide. Like, I guess let me just keep this next to me. So that we won't have to oh, now I look all disheveled. Like my hair's
Your disheveled is like my put together.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Oh my God. One arm and Emma fly swat.
Ooh, okay.
Oh.
Unreal.
I don't know if I can bring it back Carrington style. Like this is probably they actually do this like they're acting when they were at least.
Anyway, what I was saying was, let me remember what I was saying. the fly. That really just threw me off. Okay. So I think that we've put more of an emphasis on making sure that we're documenting the work we do so that we can be accurately, compensated for the work that we do, and tracking our hours and making sure that we are completely dialed in internally so that we can not only provide the best work for our clients, but also know that we are being compensated for the amazing work that we do and the hard work that goes into being part of a small team. Wait, it's on my.
And that's such a good point, because I feel like while you're battling with your friend of me, so I think that's one of the challenges of being a small business too, is that balance between growth and scaling. And sometimes as a small business in particular, like we're really passionate about the work that we're doing, and it's easy to kind of either over deliver or like follow a project in this like organic direction, but then never really stop and lift up to have that conversation about like, oh, what, this is actually kind of turning into like a whole second phase of a project. But ultimately, that's how we're able to balance our growth, it's like our revenue and our projects, with our scaling. So like the size of our team, and that's kind of a risk of a small business, is that balance getting out of whack. So then like your revenue growth and your project growth might not always sync up with the bandwidth, and like that can cause some kind of sticky moments that can be some of the most challenging parts of being a small business.
I think our mentality on tracking hours is also different than a lot of other people. I will mention to a friend of like, oh yeah, I just have to clock my hours before we head out for the weekend. And she's like, well, why do you clock your hours? You're a small business. Are you like kept to the hours for that week? And I said, no, we just do it to make sure that we're keeping an eye on our bandwidth. And it's not because of, of course, charging for what we do appropriately is a priority, but really the top priority with tracking our hours, I think, is so we can address the team's bandwidth and make sure that we are all operating sustainably. It's not so much to, again, like I said, it is a priority to make sure we're being compensated appropriately, but it is to make sure that we're all not, expanding, doing 80 hours a week for a month straight. Like that is not sustainable. And so it's more of a gauge to make sure that we're able to hire appropriately, which comes with billing appropriately, but then to have sustainable workflow for our team, because the value is placed on our team first, and then that is kind of handled with appropriate billing. Does that make sense?
We talk a lot about sustainability. Yeah, I talk, like sustainability, I feel like has a couple meanings to us. Like obviously you have like the environmental sustainability and just trying to reduce the impact and footprint of our projects, which can kind of be in like, a wasteful industry if done incorrectly. But then also sustainability in terms of the pace and rhythm and intensity of our work weeks. And that goes hand in hand with one of our top values of work-life harmony, which is ultimately why I chose to start a business. And then also, I think so many people like us are drawn to the world of small business because there is more control over work-life harmony. And I think, when considering what are the major differences between working for like a small business and a bigger business, that is the part that would be the most uncertain to me, is like kind of like what kind of control do you have over that work-life harmony piece?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say too, I think that ties into, Amanda, something that you talk about often. Our operations are so intentional compared to big businesses that have rules for rules' sake. And you always talk a lot about, doing what makes the most sense and what keeps us most efficient. And that's not only for like our team internally, but also when it comes to the work that we do for our clients too. Being super dynamic in what we provide our clients and the way that we approach our operations for them. And we do that the same internally too. So I've just like always found it interesting too, like tying the work-life harmony into what's most efficient in our operations and things like that.
Yeah, it's such a good point, because like ultimately, like, it's kind of one of those tropes or cliches that's like, oh, it's like, this is the this is life. It's not the dress rehearsal, or there is no dress rehearsal for life. And it's like, this is our opportunity to create the life that we want. And work is a part of life, and work is a big part of our waking hours. And so many people waste so much of their valuable time being unhappy or, incompetent in their role, either like acutely or chronically. And at the end of the day, like if people could, take the agency to find that role in that environment that makes sense for them and is like strengths based and aligns with their values and aligns what they want for themselves, then how much more fulfilling could so many more people's lives be. But it takes so much awareness and discipline in some ways to be able to lift up and recognize that and to be able to go after what you want. And it's funny to kind of use the words discipline in the same context with like being kind of anti-norm and like anti-rules for rules sake. I don't love outdated rules. I mean, it's so silly. Even if you looked at like the laws in Tennessee, I mean, so many are antiquated and make no sense, yet decisions are still made based on them. I remember, being told early on in my career and like my one full-time job that I needed to be there at 8:30 until 5:30, and I could have a long lunch break. And like right then and there, I'm pretty sure I reached out to Michaela and was like, yeah, so I'm thinking about exploring something on the side, because like, you just kind of know, like we talk a lot about, our time and how we're spending it and how it doesn't make any sense to be based on that model, because we're all so much more interconnected than we were. In fact, like the 40-hour work week and the 9 to 5, that was created for like assembly line manufacturing work. Like that was not created out of function or what worked best, or like definitely not mental health, definitely not work-life harmony. Those are just rules. Even, we talk about high impact office time and like not just needing to sit in each other's like general vicinity, and like never has that been more obvious than COVID. It's like, think of all that we've done in the past year plus, and we've barely seen each other in real life human. And granted, it is really enjoyable. I mean, we had an hour-long call this morning that was mostly like catching up and fun, and just that kind of more social talk that you do kind of miss out on a bit not being in the office. But again, with intentionality, like we create space to like be super connected as a team, even though we're not together in person still as often, even though now we could be. But we have this kind of like hybrid operating system of in-person time and social time and remote time that really like enables that work-life harmony and that kind of like autonomy. Because at the end of the day, like that's one of the key ingredients to the team, is the ability to operate autonomously yet interconnectedly, and to really just intrinsically care about the work that we're doing and how we perform for each other.
I think the kind of moving to this hybrid model that COVID has just kind of bred for our team has just allowed the day to be more intentional as well. I think pre-COVID, if we had an in-person meeting, the 30 minutes before and after, you kind of lost for your day because you had to account for traffic and parking, especially in Nashville, and all of that, where, if it makes sense for me to be in the office because I do have an in-person meeting, then I do that. But if it's, better for me to be at home to get, an extra 15 minutes because of where we're meeting, it's just a little bit more of a customized day, which just allows, that work-life harmony to be better as well. You're not stuck in traffic for as long. You can make space to do like normal life things. Like if you have to go to the dentist, it's just much more, feasible to go to the dentist in the morning if you're working from home beforehand than go to the office, which might not be in line with where you're going if you need to go to the dentist or the DMV or, wherever it might be. I think it's so interesting when you talk to people who work for a bigger company and they have to take PTO to go to their like yearly checkup. And, the life side of this has to be as important as the work side too, because you have to be able to make time for those things. So I've thought that has been a really unique thing and perspective to kind of come out of this. Not that it was ever rigid, especially on our team before that of, you have to be in the office. That was never the case. But it's just kind of opened, I think, all of our eyes to just being more intentional with our time, to capitalize on time spent with family, time spent just taking the day a little bit easier. If I can start work at 9 each day, and I don't have to go to the office, or I don't have to be at the office, that's 15 minutes where I can make coffee and not have to pick it up on the way, or whatever that looks like. It just feels a little bit more sustainable again in the long term.
In my program that I'm for anyone watching this. I'm in a master's program for project management. And this last week, we've been talking about the psychological factors that actually play a huge role in project management and the way in which they play into the communications, and which is like 90% of project management is spent in communications. And we see that both internally with our small team and also externally with our clients. And when we humanize the experience that we go through, not only internally, but also externally, projects and, operations are like, it allows them to run so much more smooth than you would if you just completely ignored the fact that we're all human, and the fact that we don't operate, in this kind of like assembly line structure that is, the standard workflow or workday. And just kind of making sure that no matter where you are in a project or in your team's culture or organizational operations, placing placing just like not all of, but a huge part of, the importance and values in the human side of things is always going to strengthen internal and external operations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like we talk a lot about stakeholder layers and like those interpersonal dynamics, and some are seen and some are unseen, because you never really know what someone is experiencing offline, what kind of environment they're operating within, both professionally or personally, and how it's impossible to be compartmentalized completely and buffered in our interactions in that. And the stakeholders go above and beyond our clients and the other people on their teams and their audiences, and thus the audiences for our projects, but then also like our suppliers and our vendors and like the whole supply chain of that, and how at the end of the day we're all just people making a living doing something that is like how we want to be spending that time of our lives. And then growing and finding opportunities. So it's like we talk a lot about internal and external roles, but then also like current and aspirational roles. So like always finding room for growth and learning, and just like we talk about like not printing anything, because the second that we print it, we're going to want to change it and evolve, because we never want to stagnate and just get stuck on our heels. We want to be nimble and keeping up with the times. Like I joke with my husband that like I really like want to stay tight with my grandkids someday, because I really want them to just like keep me grounded, like keep me present. I don't want to get like caught up in the past and be just kind of like sucked into irrelevance where I'm like disconnected from the world because I don't have like whatever like the future TikTok is and that sort of thing. I just, it's so easy to, again, rules for rules sake, like people get stuck where they are and don't see like what could be ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Haley, so you transitioned last year from coming from like a big company to a very small company.
Yeah.
How was that? Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, it was definitely different. I feel like I learned a lot, and that big corporate world was my first experience out of college. And getting acquainted with what that looks like. And then now coming in and seeing the small business side is definitely a totally new perspective. I feel like all of what we've just talked about is just like so many of those talking points as far as like work-life harmony and the way that we're intentional with our time, like all of that ties into it. I think I feel like a lot of times when you are set to like a 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, it's sort of, a lot of times the work can expand to the time that you are like have to allocate to it, versus like, okay, here's my target list of items. If I can knock this out in 45 minutes, this in 30 minutes, that's, maybe that's 6 hours, maybe that's 7 hours, and not necessarily dragging it out. And so I think that approach too also ties back into, that achiever mindset and that self-discipline that you have too, where it's like, here are my responsibilities. Here are the things that I need to get done. And if I can get them done in a certain amount of time, then absolutely, like, let's go catch up and get coffee with a friend in the morning before I start the day. Or, I want to work out in the afternoon and then maybe wrap up a few emails at the end of the day, before signing off. And just having that flexibility and not feeling like I'm tied to my computer for, a certain amount of time per day, I feel like is a totally different experience. And then also too, I feel like when you're in a corporate environment too, a lot of those roles are so set to where you have certain responsibilities. Um, and you're not getting to dive into another world where maybe you have some interest because you're sort of, blinders on to what your responsibilities are. And it's like, oh, one day I want to be in this position and get to do these certain things. But right now I'm here. So I don't get to have that experience. And so I feel like being on a small team, there's always so much going on and our projects are always so different. And we are able to then explore these different worlds, or I'm interested in, checking out what this looks like, or how can we tie that into our client experience, or, pull this certain vendor in to elevate this project. So I feel like it's a lot more of that like autonomy and creativity to be able to, look into different worlds. And, our roles are always expanding, evolving, and we're always just mindful of what our interests are. And so rather than being, pigeonholed into exactly what your role is meant to do, the output that you're putting out for the overall corporation, it's more for us, what is going to benefit all aspects of our business.
Yes, that what you said kind of like unlocked a lot in me about goals and how companies are all about metrics, and or especially bigger businesses, because I mean they have to be. Like so many decisions are made around data, and one big way that organizations capture the more like abstract and like nebulous parts of their operations are through goals. But like I've always had a funny relationship with goals because I know I'm supposed to set them because like it helps provide like set expectations, and like if a team doesn't have expectations, then like it's just this gray space that's super confusing, and like everyone's like, so what are we working toward? But with goals, like at the end of the day, like say annual goals, like if I made annual goals today for a year from now and I was like we must stick to these, we would probably miss out on so many more opportunities than we would take advantage of if we had a lot more like ambiguity in the picture. And so sometimes people can get so caught up in achieving their goals because that might be like what their like bonus is based on, or like these other benefits are based on these goals that they feel like they have to achieve the goal, and it kind of becomes again like an outdated norm that might not be relevant. Like even like quarterly goals, like I know we're about to be reviewing this again as we approach the end of Q2. Like it's been a minute since I've looked at mine, and like honestly, like looking at mine again, I might be like, yeah, I know I didn't do that. Or like that one's super irrelevant now. And then I'm going to set these other goals that are so logical based on like where we are heading into Q3. And by Q4, I'll probably look back at my Q3 goals and be like, yeah, those also like, how did I, think that was a good idea just 2 months ago? Like that goal is now also as antiquated as my Q2 goals were. So like viewing goals as more like intentions or like fluid or evolving, and like editing them. Like maybe it's okay. Like maybe I should have been editing my Q2 goals throughout Q2 in order to make sure they're relevant. But when you're working for a bigger business and you feel like your compensation or like other factors are tied to your ability to get a promotion, like I know of firsthand experiences from some of your friends, like if you don't hit these goals or these quotas, then like you're not getting a promotion. Like maybe there could be other value added in other areas that would actually be more impactful, but people get so caught up in their goals and quotas that have been set for them that they can't make that impact in these other areas.
Right. I feel like that also ties into, that focus on trajectory. Like in a big corporation is you're analyzing what your path looks like within that organization, and you're like again, like trying to move, you're focusing on those milestones that you have to hit in order to get to that place. Whereas whenever, you're on a small team that's more autonomous and you have all these, you're wearing all these different hats, it's like you're actually gaining more like valuable experience, like actually doing more, like a variety of different things, and your actual like soft skills are growing far more than if you were to just continue to try and hit these milestones to then, grow along this trajectory of, the corporate ladder. But yeah, that's just something that I've like thought of too.
Yeah, if you're constantly working towards something in the future based on past experiences, then you're not taking into account all that you're gathering and benefiting from in the present. Something you said too, like resonated with a recent thought. I Camilla is in her like last year. My 4-year-old is in her last year of like daycare school before heading into big bad kindergarten. And like I was telling you guys earlier, like I'm coming to terms with the fact that there's like less fluidity whenever they're like in this like elementary system compared to daycare, and how, I have a huge family from very diverse political views, diverse upbringings, and like different parts of the country. And like I learn new things every time that we're together. Like I crack open a new thought or like a new perspective on such a variety of things. And it's just so special. And those social skills too. So like there's part of me again with the norms. I'm like, you're telling me that like my 5-year-old's going to learn more sitting her butt in this seat in this classroom for 5 days than she's going to learn with like interacting directly with people ages, 2 to like 92 with all these different perspectives. Like you're trying to tell me she's going to learn more in that classroom. And like, let's think outside the box a little bit and have a little bit more flexibility here. Again, this is a very selfish perspective because like I chose this flexible path and I feel a little entitled to it in these other facets too.
I, having only worked for A&M, from an internship to my only job post-college, I feel extremely privileged to have this point of view, of flexibility, of, playing to your strengths and doing jobs that are strength-based so you enjoy your day-to-day, that whenever friends or family have job experiences that are not the same, I'm like, well, just leave. You know what I mean? Like you shouldn't have to deal with that. You shouldn't have to be in an environment that doesn't make you feel fulfilled every single day. And they're like, listen, the small business world, like, allows for that more than the corporate world does. And I was like, what do you mean you have to work 4 weeks to get 1 hour of PTO? That seems ridiculous. And so I have to be aware that I come from a privileged perspective of this is all I've known of. If I needed to take a few days off to go home for something, I can. Or if I'm going to work from St. Louis for a week, I can, because I can work remote, and it's just flexible that I think I have to be aware. But it also allows our team to be really nimble and be just flexible in kind of all facets of our skill set, our environment, and all of that, and just be able to flex a little bit more. So I have to be very aware when I give advice that I come from a different perspective of, well, that's not the case everywhere. It can't be, well, you have to demand at your corporate job that they're flexible and they allow you to do X, Y, Z. No, that's not, that's not feasible.
I think to your point, Bailey, that's why this conversation is important to share, because we have such an amazing culture within A&M that allows us this flexibility, that allows us to feel and promote contentment without or throughout our work and individual lives. And that's something this whole conversation has really like just reminded me of a couple of our, or I think it was 2 quarter meetings ago. One of the themes that we hit on was contentment and what that looks like. And I feel like one of my questions was like, how do we motivate each other? But I feel like that's a huge part of it, is reminding each other constantly that our career path isn't linear, and really letting go of that mindset and allowing each other to explore the things that make us truly fulfilled, and just having the opportunity to work for a company that has a culture of like this abundance mindset of like, we don't have to stick to the status quo. If you want to be a copywriter, you can go be a copywriter and incorporate that into the role that you have. And, you know, if you are super, super passionate about on-site time and being in the moment at these events, like you can still do that and move up in your role, and not necessarily move up, but move out and in all directions, and realizing that going up isn't the only way. You know, you can expand in other ways that are really beneficial.
And I don't want to be like, you know, there are days where we're not always like, man, today was the best day ever. I cannot believe that this day happened. Like, it was amazing. There are days where we're like bogged down. The work is hard. We have to handle, you know, things we don't want to handle that aren't ideal. But I think a conversation we always have is kind of like, you know, looking forward, do we see the light at the end of the tunnel? And if we ever don't, then it's a whole team conversation of like, how do we rally and get through this? And that's like the small business mindset as well, is that we can work so siloed, but the moment any of us has to throw up a red flag of this is happening, I need some guidance or outside perspective or just help in general, we're kind of all just ready to jump in on those things. And that is, you know, why I can look back on those days and still feel like a fondness towards them, even though I wouldn't want to duplicate those days. I feel like a fondness to the memory of the teamwork that we felt. And so, you know, there's definitely days where it's still like, man, today was rough. I'm definitely going to pour myself a glass of wine. And then there are days where, you know, the wine is celebratory instead. But I don't want it to seem like I'm just painting this like rose-colored glasses over everything. But the way the team rallies and just works together is the way that I can look back on all those and be like, yeah, we did that. We came out of that, or whatever, you know, the experience may be.
Yes. We talk about like contentment, like, you know, if you think about like your days and like, here's like a high and here's a low, you know, you think of that kind of baseline as being neutral. And then we talk about as a team aiming for a baseline up here that's called contentment. And how really, like, if contentment can be our baseline, then we're going to end up living more fulfilled and happy lives that we can look back on and be like, ah, made some good choices. And like, I spent my time wisely, and that's like what we all have at the end of the day. And yeah, like, again, like, just because like if contentment is the baseline instead of just like neutral, then that doesn't mean that you don't dip below it or like go way above it. You know, it just means that that's kind of like where we reset and level out, and we can kind of meet back there. And just like Bailey, you were saying, like, you know, we talk about like, do you see the light at the end of the tunnel though? Like, is there a path forward? Like, sometimes like we have to come together as a team to kind of like create that light, or like little micro torches along the way. Like, we might not see that final light at the end of the tunnel, but like, let's at least like light a torch right here and like a torch over there. And then eventually, before we know it, like, we've worked through it, and like, bam, like there's that end light.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that analogy of the light, the tunnel, the torches on the side, like all of that.
Light it up.
And then we come out and it's just like sunny day.
I'm picturing your album cover.
Yeah, I feel like that like higher level of contentment, like that higher baseline of contentment level, like back to what your question, like Emma's question, as far as like motivation, it's like, you know, I think just intrinsically, like, we're all like individually motivated just based on our personality types, like the achiever, the like helper, like we all want to do our best work and get things done. And that's what we are passionate about too. So, but aside from that, I think just like looking at it from the small business lens versus like the corporate lens, like viewing motivation as, you know, I'm motivated to get all these things done and to do all this work and you know, be efficient in this space, because if I do that, then I'm doing it for my own like level of contentment versus like I'm doing it because, you know, someone's like, you know, being, I don't know, because it's tied to something else that's, you know, not necessarily directly correlated with, you know, I'm still going to be here for another 6 hours today and all of that. I don't know. So I feel like just that like that higher baseline of like the contentment level is just a huge motivating factor too. And then also just the fact that we are like a small team and we're supporting each other, like we want to support each other. And it's like we always want to be, I think we talk a lot about like our priority too is just being there for the team, and making sure that, each of our team members are getting what they need from us or the support that they need or like the insight or things like that. And so I feel like that too, I feel like we have a good balance of autonomy plus, that support. And like always, like Bailey was saying, you know, if the light is very far away at the end of if the tunnel's very long and then we need to circle back and everyone needs to come together as a team, it's like I think being a small team allows us that flexibility to, be able to work through something and get it done and figure out whatever we need to figure out.
Yeah, I'm picturing a visual of like the contentment baseline.
Mhm.
It's like, Emma, Bailey, and Haley are all standing up there on like the contentment baseline. And like, if I, for some reason, am like down here, then it's like, okay, hang on. Like one person dangles from like the contentment line and like they create this daisy change, like whip me up onto the contentment line. It's like, if like any of us, like we all know the value of contentment and therefore like we work to get each other there too. Like on our Slack channel, it's just like constantly like, oh, I can help with this. Like, oh, like I'd love to brainstorm with you. It's like so proactive. And like, I don't know, I just wish I could like screenshot all of that and be like, look how cool we are. Like, look how cool we are. Like, it's so neat to see how we just like rally for each other.
Because at the end of the day, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, as far as like actual operations, Slack was going to be one that I really like talked about with this motivational piece and creating lines of communication within our small team. I feel like it would be wrong to say that it's easy to ever create lines of communication, no matter how small or complex your team looks or is. I think it's always important to keep those lines of communication open and always extending some sort of olive branch, no matter what time of day it is, to be there and support your team. And I think Slack is like huge for us. Like there's never a moment when we're not like throughout the day, just like updating each other, just even if it's just reacting to like a message that's sent, like knowing, even especially in this virtual world, and working remotely, just like knowing that we're not on an island. And, even if I'm just sending an update that requires no action item from any of you, like just the fact that somebody saw it and, knows what's going on is really makes me feel very supported.
Yeah. So just the fact that you used the word culture at some point during this conversation, when we've been largely vast majoritarily virtual since like this team of 4 came together. Like the fact that the word culture is even being used is like such a testament to like each individual person on this grid and how we've leveraged the tools that are available to us.
Yeah, I was going to say Slack also helps to add like a level of humor to our daily communication, which adds into that culture. I think we've probably all seen the video where it's like you get a text from your boss that's like K, and you're like, do they hate me? And so the fact that we've got Slack where you can send gifts and just, it's more of a like camaraderie based communication system where of course we're focused whenever we need to be driving progress, but that we always have that kind of general line open to celebrate each other's wins, whether they're work related or not, whether they're in our personal lives or not, and just have that kind of level of humor, but also human interaction on Slack that's not email based. Because email, you're always like, what is that? What is the message underneath this? And we don't email each other, very often. But with clients, you're always like reading into like, what do they mean by have a nice weekend? Should I be working this weekend? Is that what they're saying? They're going to expect something from me before I see them on Monday. And so Slack, I like because it's more of a, organic discussion communication tool, because we're not in person, and maybe it catches a little bit more of that like water cooler talk if you were in the office. Not that we have a water cooler.
I wish.
But it catches more of like the fun communication that you might miss if you were just emailing or just, like project focused. I think that's a really important tool for us, because then we get in person, the humor's there still. We can discuss and joke and all of that, but it also plays through when we're not able to get together.
Totally. Yeah. And it's like, it's more relevant, like it's real time, it's background, it's like ongoing, and plus like an email is like a task, you know, to like go into your email, like be prepared, like whatever you're unleashing in there, and like then you see it. And by then it's like so much has happened, and like the thread might be long, and maybe some people were treating it as conversational, but by the time you catch up, it's like you're inserting into this conversation that's already been happening. Whereas Slack, it's just ever evolving.
You can also edit in Slack, which is a huge play, because the spelling,
especially with talk to text.
For everyone watching, I drive to St. Louis twice a month to work there where my boyfriend lives. And there's many times where I will message Amanda and I'm like, using talk to text, so please excuse all grammatical issues and weird things. And I'll read it back and it is so wrong.
Oh, like, I think one of my favorites was like, I didn't get the warning in advance. And so like I was reading a message and she used the word like befall. And I was like, dang, like something's happening. Like maybe I need to call her. And then I got like sorry, using talk to text. And I was like, okay, this makes so much more sense. Cause like to befall, I mean, that's like.
I'll read it back and I'm like, none of this is correct. None of it's correct. And it's always way longer than if I had just messaged you, typed it out. Like that, it would have been way more precise than if I were to use talk to text.
And I love it. It's super inorganic, like ha ha ha.
But you have to say all the periods and commas and exclamation points out loud for them to add. And so sometimes I'll forget and it's just one really long sentence. And I would say typically, I feel like, Amanda, you've understood what I was trying to say. Then I tried to go back and edit and it's just not great. So I'm trying to be
I don't know, we did the OG version too, because it's pretty funny.
Hilarious. Very, very funny. But
I was thinking about during the goals part, like I was thinking about like whenever we're talking about goals, how like Bailey, like if we went back and looked at like your 2020 goals, like I don't even know where like it was. Definitely, I'd probably laugh out loud, like looking at them. Like again, like if we had just like stayed like 2 feet planted in those 2020 goals, like what a joke. Because ultimately, like because we didn't, and again, there's like a reason why I don't even remember what those were. Like if we had, stayed firmly planted in those, then like all this space was created, and you like stepped up and into that space, into like this new opportunity. So it's like more, I'd say like that lack of getting just like so caught up in like the target, the end result, like has created this like new role for you, a new world, and like unlocked this new perspective on things.
Yeah, my 2020 goals, I can only remember 2 off the top of my head. One was to create all agendas 24 hours in advance. And the other one was to spend before 11 a.m. every Monday, was to like look at my 2 weeks ahead of that date and anticipate like what needed to be done. Because we were coming off of a really busy fall. It was my kind of first fall in the working world. And, I wasn't lifting up and anticipating in the way that I should. And I thought that, that fall was a big kind of crucible for me as far as like the pressure. And I think that's whenever you see your faults more apparently in like a retrospective, way, you're able, that kind of shows the area that you have to make progress whenever you have all that pressure on you. And so that was a really, I think, pivotal, time to kind of notice, okay, yes, I need to readdress some of these spaces as I look forward into 2020. And then, the beginning of 2020 was really busy, and then everything shut down. And so it was definitely a time where, I was really hyper-focused on lifting up, looking ahead, and then it didn't matter how far we lifted up, we still, the future was just so uncertain at that time, which really gave me some perspective to look at what, we were doing, expand some areas that I was interested in. I like took a Google ad class on LinkedIn because we had time to do that. And we were doing skill shares every week and just trying to kind of expand our repertoire of what, you know, we were good at and just learning because we had space to do that. And so I think that was a unique time where it didn't matter really how far I lifted up at that point because we were still just so uncertain about what 2020 was going to look like. To then really abruptly in the fall kind of rush back into this, it's super important to be disciplined and lift up and anticipate and just be on top of the work that was being done. And so I think I had a really unique summer of 2020 to be able to anticipate and kind of look forward and look at everything more from an operational point, because at one point it was just Amanda and I kind of figuring out what was going to happen. So it was really needed for me to be able to anticipate and kind of run those things without having a reminder to make agendas 24 hours in advance. It's just become a habit because it had to be, which I think was unique. I feel like a different person than the beginning of 2020. It's really kind of insane to reflect and just in like personal confidence. And then, I mean, I just think that I probably feel like a different person to other people as well. So that's kind of an exciting pivot personally. So
yeah, it's unbelievable. And it makes me, you know, just like hearing you like recount like that, this whole timeline, like small business is such a two-way street. Like you've talked about how special it is to be like part of a small business, but like just as much on the flip side, like it takes a very special person to be in a small business successfully and autonomously, you know, in order to like protect our culture, like having the right people, like, you know, like in that culture is what creates it ultimately, because it wouldn't be possible to enjoy like the benefits of being a small business without like the right people in on those teams in order to make it work. Like it takes each and every one of us and kind of each of our special sauce and like team spirit, but then like individual abilities to get things done. Like it's just we're all so interconnected, and it's absolutely what makes a small business as enjoyable as it can be.
Mm-hmm. I think it's so special when our team is on site at events together and we just kind of fall into our like roles really naturally. We on site and beforehand, I think that when you're in a small business, you have to be a team of individually responsible people who care about the work that they're doing, and see it as not just a clock in and clock out. Feel care in what they're doing and the output. And whenever you have that, then it's kind of nice if you can step back for a second and just kind of watch everybody doing what they're really good at. It's such a like magical moment that reminds you of kind of why you work with these people and why, you know, reaffirms that you're like, yes, this is it. And so from our team to our vendors, you know, we work with experts that are experts in their field and they don't need to be micromanaged. And we're working with them because they do a great job and the deliverable is going to be excellent. And so it's nice whenever you can just, you know, let people do what they're supposed to be doing because it's their passion and their like calling, if that's what it is, you know, or if it's just what they like to do. But it's nice to see it all kind of come together and watch everyone do what they're meant to be doing. So it's such a nice payoff. And I'm looking forward to more in-person, you know, on-site activations, even if it's just virtual too. It's just nice to see it all kind of come together. The payoff is like, I love it.
Yeah, I love that. Like viewing operations, it's like, we talk about like setting each other up for success, whether that's us as a team or kind of the extensions of our teams or us as an extension of our client teams, like just setting each person along the way up for success. Any final thoughts?
I can't stop smiling. My cheeks hurt from smiling.
That's a good way to end.
Yeah.
Monday.